about we talk about flying, since it radically changes in this arc. By the beginning, most of the main active fighting characters have learned Buku Jutsu to a certain extent, but it's still used mainly for levitation, not travel. Goku still uses Kinton for that, even after he comes back to life, although since he just got done flying across a serpentine road, that's clearly done to conserve energy. When Goku first arrives in the afterlife, he attempts to fly across a serpentine road, but he quickly peters out and runs the rest of the way. But after the year has passed, everyone is flying all over the place. We see Yamcha and Gohan fly for the first time, and we see people arriving to and leaving the battle by flying, and as I said, Goku, who had to run across a serpentine road before, now makes the return trip by flying at high speeds. Piccolo flies as a means of travel even at the beginning, but he makes some kind of claim that his flight is different from Buku Jutsu, whatever that means. When Gohan teaches a class in flying, he specifically refers to it as Buku Jutsu, and he had to have learned it from Piccolo since we see him fly here, the very first time being just after Goku saves him from Vegeta killing Nappa. Speaking of which, it's funny that Goku assumes his son knows how to fly because he has no problem just letting him go in midair. It's very fortunate that Gohan didn't faceplant 50 feet up. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is that the days of Ten Shinhan using a jet flyer to confront a bad guy are long gone. Flying is here, the future is now. Before I finish summing up, I'd like to raise a little issue called to Z or not to Z. In a perfect world, I wouldn't need to do this at all. In a perfect world, there would be no division between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, or at the very least, fans would actually know that Toriyama wrote one series. But as I said all those years ago in my introduction video, there is no such thing as a Dragon Ball Z manga. Even Viz has finally acknowledged that with their 3-in-1's release. Toriyama's series was called Dragon Ball from beginning to end. It was only the TV series that got to a certain point in the adaptation and then just decided to start over with a new title. And, as everybody knows, the beginning of this story arc is where the TV series made the split. But make no mistake, this is still just Dragon Ball. If you don't believe me, crack open your copy of the Viz manga and look at the chapter title pages. They still say Dragon Ball. But for just a moment, in a purely speculative manner, I'd like to take a look at this issue in general and try to figure out whether or not there's any merit in splitting the series. But Lance, I hear you saying, since there is no split in the manga, why aren't you talking about this in DBD TV instead? That's a good question. Here's my answer. As far as I know, there has never been an explanation from Toei as to why they felt a rebranding was necessary. We have quotes from Toriyama where he states he didn't feel it was necessary, but nothing from anyone stating the opposite. So for all I know, it could have been completely random or a rating stunt, and the Saiyan arc was simply the first break in the story after they came to that decision. But for the moment, I'm going to operate under the assumption that the division was made, at least in part, due to elements of the story feeling appropriate for such a split. And since we are to be talking about the narrative, how it's supposedly different, that seems to me to be very relevant to this video, even though the title itself isn't. In my experience, I have heard the split defended by fans. Specifically, I hear it defended by fans who are devoted to the Z portion, who generally aren't as big a fan of the stuff that came before it. Or alternatively, I hear it from fans who prefer the replacement American musical score and use the split to justify why the original music is okay for Dragon Ball but not appropriate for Dragon Ball Z. And it usually boils down to a handful of arguments. 1. Dragon Ball is an action comedy, while Dragon Ball Z is an action drama. 2. Dragon Ball is about Goku as a kid, while Dragon Ball Z is about Goku as an adult. 3. Dragon Ball is fantasy, while Dragon Ball Z is science fiction. 4. Dragon Ball is about Goku, while Dragon Ball Z is about Gohan. So let's start with number 1, which is usually the one I hear justifying the replacement of the musical score. Is the Z portion generally more serious than the DB portion? Yes. But that's in a general sense. For the most part, you could split the series at any point, and what comes after the split would generally be more serious. And that's because as a whole, Dragon Ball gets progressively more serious. The Red Ribbon Army arc is more serious than the Hunt for the Dragon Balls arc. And to completely devalue that, the Buu arc is less serious than the Cell arc. Although, like a lot of this content's going to be, it's not something Toei would have been aware of at the time. But if I was forced to pinpoint one moment where the series shifted to a more serious tone, it would have been right here. The start of the Piccolo arc is the most abrupt shift to an action-oriented, battle-to-save-the-world type story, which is why fans at the time thought the story was going to end at its conclusion. Same thing for number 2. Yes, Z exclusively features an adult Goku, and DB generally features a childlike but technically adolescent Goku. But again, Goku grows up at the beginning of the 23rd Budokai arc, and don't tell me that legal adulthood in Japan is 20 and according to the timeline Goku is around 18. Toriyama said he came to his editor insisting he make Goku an adult in that arc, not the Saiyan arc. It's in that arc where everyone freaks out that Goku has grown up, not the Saiyan arc. The number is just semantics. Goku is presented as having matured a whole arc before the Z-split. As for the third point, the fantasy versus science fiction, there is certainly something of a case for that. Goku and Piccolo, previously rooted purely in fantasy, are rewritten in the Saiyan arc to be of alien descent. The next arc has the characters go out into space. The next arc has the villains as robots and biotechnology with a story rooted in a time travel premise. And little by little, the Chinese-inspired topography and classic martial arts feel is replaced. Still, I have a hard time with the term science fiction being used to describe any part of Dragon Ball. As the name implies, science needs to be involved, and Dragon Ball doesn't even attempt to incorporate it. If anything, it's replacing an East Asian fantasy with a space and technology fantasy. And that's not taking into account the fact that Dragon Ball from day one has featured advanced technology, most notably in its Hoi Poi capsules, flying cars, and futuristic cities, none of which would be out of place in a science fiction work. For the fourth point, yeah, before the split is a Gohan-free zone. In fact, one of the titles Toei pitched for this rebranding was, I kid you not, Dragon Ball, Gohan's Big Adventure. Calling him the main character over Goku, though? I'd argue against that. Yes, Gohan has more room to develop, while Goku becomes relegated to the guy who shows up at the last minute to save the day, but Goku's still clearly the star. But when I get right down to it, while I still maintain the series does not need to be split into two, that doing so probably does more than a small disservice to the earlier material, and that the supposed rationale for it involves quite a bit of hindsight and somewhat inaccurate generalizations, did it end up serving as a good spot in which to split it? Actually, yes. Prior to this arc, the story had come to a wrap-up point so conclusive that Kame-Sennin had to address the audience to tell them it wasn't the end of the story. It introduces Saiyans, who, for better or worse, will dominate the series from this point on. It introduces Gohan and Vegeta, who will be two of the most important characters for the rest of the series. It starts out with a reunion of characters who haven't seen each other in a long time. Gohan does serve as something of a launching pad for a new generation. Even the character of Lunch is written out between the two arcs, although since Dragon Ball Z added her to some early episodes, that one doesn't quite work out. Other than between the Cell and Buu arcs, I can't think of another point in the series that would serve anywhere near as well to split it. That's not to say I agree with it. As far as I'm concerned, it's one series, and I usually refrain from saying Dragon Ball Z or DBZ while talking about the franchise, unless I am absolutely specifically talking about something from that particular TV series or the movies related to it. I'm just saying, as far as choosing a point goes, especially given how little information they had about the future direction of the story, they did an amazing job. As I said before, the Saiyan arc holds a special place in my heart because it's where I first came into the series. And because of that, it had me worried that I would let nostalgia gloss over its flaws. But unlike the Piccolo arc, where the more I looked at it critically, the less I liked it, the more I look at this arc, the more I find to praise. This is literally the first arc where I wondered if I would ever run out of things to say. For example, I love the art. It's fantastic. The speed lines, the character designs, everything. The second chapter of the arc has Goku looking a bit skinny and wonky for some reason, but maybe Toriyama was just having an off day. Oh, you know what else I love about the final battle? That by the end, the characters are just in shreds. They are struggling simply to move, just to muster up enough energy to attack at all. Everyone looks broken by the end. It doesn't come down to a huge beam struggle or pulling out a powerful new transformation. Goku doesn't even manage to beat Vegeta. It's only their combined efforts and some luck that they manage to survive and drive him away. The battle doesn't end with a shout. It ends with a whimper. And to me, that is so much more dramatic. It feels so much more real, so much more grueling. I can take a glimpse at the condition of Vegeta's armor and know exactly what part of the battle I'm looking at. I can compare the grim brokenness of the end to the anxious optimism of the beginning and reflect, yeah, this has been a very terrible day. So while I do feel the middle of the arc drops the ball a bit, the real accomplishment of this arc is managing to craft a solid dramatic through line through its combat. The fighting isn't part of the story, it is the story. It's where all the plot and character development happens. That's really a feeling I only get from this arc. And that for me makes it the greatest battle in the entire franchise. As such, if you've been following my comments from the beginning, it should come as no surprise then that I award the Saiyan arc a 9 out of 10. It's a fantastic middle of Dragon Ball story. It's a fresh new beginning, but still has a lot of the characters and tone from earlier. It pushes things forward in new ways, but it's just before we get to the standard formula of transformations that will dominate the second half of Dragon Ball. Before we go, I have to address the elephant in the room. I'm all out of high scores. I have one decent score, a 5, and 2 low scores, a 3 and a 1, reserved for the Frieza, Cell, and Buu arcs. And I know those arcs are especially popular, but I'm not going to alter my opinions to cater to the masses. I'm going to be as honest and analytical as I've ever been. I'm going to continue to give credit where I feel an arc does well, but I'm not going to sugarcoat anything I feel is lacking or just downright bad. So I'm just throwing the warning out there that Dragon Ball Dissection might, in a general sense, become snarkier as it goes on. But just don't forget during all of it that I love Dragon Ball, and if I force it to go out back and pick out a hickory switch, it's only because I care. Oh, one more thing, because I'm sure somebody's going to say something about it. I didn't really talk all that much about Vegeta. Believe me, there will be no shortages of opportunities in the future to discuss his character. For now, all I really need to say is that he is a great villain in this arc. So that concludes Dragon Ball Dissection December for 2015. Thanks so much for everyone who has stuck by this series for so long and found something enjoyable or informative with it. I hope you had fun this month, and I can't wait to continue in 2016. Next time, Piccolo grows an extra finger, Snow gets the worst vacation ever, and could it be? Goku has to earn his power-up! That's right, I'm talking about the TV version of the Piccolo Daimao arc. See you there!
蹴られた地球が起こって火山を爆発させる溶けた氷の中に恐竜がいたら玉乗り飛行みたいね